It is Unforgiven, a movie I'm sure people have heard of from 1992. The plot summary: retired Old West gunslinger Will Money reluctantly takes on one last job to avenge an injustice with the help of his old partner and a newer outlaw known simply as the Schofield Kid. So, directed by Eastwood, starring Eastwood,
Hmm.
also Gene Hackman and Morgan Freeman. Talked about this movie. I brought it into the episode of movies that shaped our feelings of movies, part two. So if people want to go back and hear my thoughts on how this movie helped me understand and appreciate Westerns more and just from a genre perspective, that's a great discussion I think we had back in that episode. But for me, the reason why I brought this in as my masterpiece for Clint is I really think that it is the cleanest distillation of this worldview that we've been talking about of there are no good people or bad people, and that the choices that people make, they have consequences and they stay with you. And what do you think when you think back on your life about the choice that you made, how those choices also sets your reputation? I think these are just the distillation of all of these things he touches on in every movie. They're laid the barest here and just handled so incredibly masterfully. And I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that he is in the movie. So he brings the weight of his own on screen persona and all the things that he's done as Dirty Harry and
Hmm.
the Man with No Name and all these Westerns and things like that, where he never played a guy with the white hat. He was always doing kind of questionable things. That I think to me adds a lot more weight because you bring that baggage into this movie, even though you don't need it to have the story hit you. But I think it helps a lot in this, and a lot more things to say about the film. But yeah, I want to start with your thoughts on this. I think the first time you'd seen this was when I brought it into the episode last,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
It probably was the first Western I saw kind of from beginning to end and kind of blew me away and got me interested in watching Westerns because I just was like, oh, I just had a very stereotypical idea of like black and white or maybe too slow. And this is a deep, deep movie from beginning to end. And of course, like you said, it's like a perfect distillation of all the themes that he's dealt with and has been dealing with. But his presence also, it's a bit of a character study and rumination reflection on his own screen persona, which to your point kind of just brings extra weight to it, because he's
Hmm.
playing with audience expectation as well, that okay, that guy who you've been seeing gunslinging and making questionable choices all these years, if you met him at this point in his life, what is the weight of that? What is the cost of that? And that just gives like so much more heft to the movie. But then also, I think we've talked about some great performances in Clint Eastwood movies, but this might be at the very top of the totem pole in terms of Gene Hackman's performance in this
Hmm.
movie,
Yeah.
and just seeing the two of them together go toe to toe like that has its own level, and that's kind of elevates the movie even further. And then technically, like this movie is from the opening stills of the sun going down
Oh
and
yeah.
what have you. It's just so magical and beautiful. It's a sweeping western with all this depth, meaning, weight on it, and that's why it's a masterpiece.
Absolutely. Yeah. That opening too. I love the
Yeah.
film is bookended by these shots
Right.
of his wife has died. So he's a gunslinger who killed a bunch of people, basically a bad guy. He was a bad guy who then found love, married, settled down, had kids, and his wife died of an illness. And the movie starts and ends with the wife's grave. And I love the text that appears over the opening and the closing of the movie, talking about the wife's mother really not understanding why she ever was with this guy or fell for him because he's a bad guy. And I think what that is really saying is about reputation, that
Right.
people, if you've done bad actions and you have a reputation that might be bad, people assume you're a bad person, and then there's nothing about you that is redeemable. And why would she ever fall in love with this person who's clearly terrible? And she never understands. At the end of the movie, again, hear from the mother of passed away wife saying, he disappeared, and she still will never understand why she was ever with him. And that again is showing that even though you make bad decisions, you have a bad reputation, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Because
Yeah.
he wrestles with things in this movie. He has regret. He's like, yeah, I killed a ton of people, but do I feel good about it? No, I don't think I
Yeah.
do. I love that layer onto this movie, that reputation piece, which also you can say could be Clint as well.
Right.
Like as an actor, it's like, well, you played all these horrible people in these movies. Like, is that who you are? Are you going to be like a Dirty Harry on set and telling me to make my day every time? Like that. I think that layer into this is interesting too, to your point of like him as an actor and that persona, I think layers on some really fascinating things in this movie.
Totally. And just a commentary on masculinity. Maybe at some place, Clint Eastwood thinks about this that, okay, all the Dirty Harry movies have maybe made young men think about masculinity in a certain kind of way. And as I get older, maybe I need to speak to them in a certain way and say that, oh, well, yeah, that's probably one side of it, but there's more to it. You have to look at this in a more sort of wholesome, rounded kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and he's doing that while looking at himself and the characters he's played. So it's just so layered.
Exactly. There's actually, so since we've been doing this episode, I've kind of gone off and continue to watch a bunch of Clint directed movies I've never seen. So I'm in the middle of doing that. Maybe I'll finish all of his 30 whatever. But there's a movie that I just saw that he made a little before this called White Hunter Black Heart that also deals with this exact same theme, but through the lens of Hollywood about image on screen versus off screen and how that affects the person. There's just something I just want to mention because you were mentioning
Mm,
that movie deals with a lot of those themes. It's not the
mm,
greatest film, but I think it was very interesting. His first kind of exploration of touching that, but more specifically about Hollywood. So I recommend to listeners check that out if you
mm.
haven't heard it. It's not really well known. Again, I don't think it's that great, but it still hits on this theme, which this movie does so well. But I do, again, Gene Hackman's performance and his character too. Like he's a guy who's just trying to build a house, he's trying to retire. You don't really think of him as a bad guy. He's just trying to keep the crime out of his town after these prostitutes get cut up and they trying to come into this town and kill the people that hurt us. Well, he doesn't want all these outlaws coming into his town, roughing things up and causing problems. So you understand where he's coming from too, even though he does terrible things in the film,
Right.
especially to Morgan Freeman's character. And he's not a good guy, but you
No.
like empathize with where he's coming from, which again I think is a very key component to Clint's worldview of like even a bad guy like Gene Hackman's bad sheriff in this. Like I get it. Like I get what he's doing. I mean, I wouldn't do the same myself. And I guess I can also judge his actions, but it comes from a place where of understanding, which is all what empathy is about. It doesn't mean you condone
Right.
everything people are doing, right? I think his performance is might be his best Gene Hackman
Yeah,
performance in any film, though he's a fantastic actor and I
it
love
really
Hackman,
is. I'm
but this
so
is
glad he
so good.
won for this. I think he did.
He did, yeah. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.